Throughout the past few months, I've had several of our partner organizations reach out to me and want to recognize leaders in their organizations during this awards banquet. Those leaders have made a positive impact on our industry. For our industry recognition, I would like to ask John Thomas to join me on stage to make the presentation.
Good evening, everybody. All right. This may be one of the less formal portions of our presentation. First of all, I just want to have a round of applause for all the presenters for all the breakouts over the last day and a half. I just want to have a round of applause. Is Peter from Pittsburgh still here? He may have taken off. He gets the award for the most energetic presentation on residential ground source selling. If anybody sat in his session, Peter moved a metaphor from the carbon impact of taking 2 cars off the road to buying a geothermal system will actually shorten your commute. Okay? That's the kind of passion this guy has. I'm gonna track him down, okay? All right. Next, I would like to invite all the GeoExchange board members, GeoExchange staff, and Richard Lay to come join us on stage, please. Richard, thanks for joining us.
John.
Okay. Independent of what your philosophy is on tax credits, and we had a good representation of both sides of the equation and the story on tax incentives to support energy efficiency and preserving resources from an environment and society standpoint, I want you to give a round of applause. These are your Washington Warriors that over the last 3 years consistently continued to not give up and got 48 and 25D across the line for the geothermal industry. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to make some estimates now, so please don't correct me while I'm talking, okay? I'm estimating in 2017, I've only been in the industry since December of 16. It was the perfect time to join the industry. Absolutely. For those of you that have been in the industry much longer, over the last 3 years, these Washington Warriors, joined by many others that are in the audience and many others from over 30 members of our broader coalition, to have orphan technologies, which is what we were labeled. We need to shed that term to get us across the line for us to be included in the renewable energy tax incentives. They represent over the last 3 years over 12 fly-ins. 5 of those occurred last year. So all of us were there for at least 4 of this group. And I'm estimating over the last 3 years over 750 individual meetings with congressional and Senate offices in order to reinstate the tax credits to absolutely support the most efficient thermal energy initiative on the globe. Thank you very much. There's one member of this group that's been committed to the industry for 31 years. They started in 1987, and they took a small diversion into the Illinois Telecom Association for a few years and then was recruited back to lead the charge for the GeoExchange and the geothermal industry in 2010. This individual single-handedly led the charge when we were at some low moments. and we'll talk about a few of those in a minute, when we were at some low moments, when the industry volume was at, I would say, a 25-year low, and we were meeting to figure out how we could fund the next round of fly-ins and the lobbying activity that was required to have the most efficient thermal energy system to be supported along with other renewable energies. And this individual never gave up. And so with that, I would like to share a bit of a color background story on this person who led the charge by Mr. Steve Smith and Mr. Dan Ellis.
So with every person's history and background along the path and in the geothermal world, there's some funny stuff that goes on, and sometimes funny and a little bit. I guess mainly we'll have to call it funny. Doug, sorry. So back in what, Dan? 1993, 2?
Probably was in that range.
Yeah.
92, 3.
We were owned by a group of co-ops, a distribution company, and carried water furnace. And Doug was my boss. Now I'm his boss. It's kind of cool. Anyway, we chartered a flight to Fort Wayne. We took our board of directors and had a meeting there. Well, at 5 o'clock, Jim Shields goes, "It's time." So he sent off for the liquor store, and the party started.
The top shelf.
Top shelf.
Wild turkey off the top shelf from the janitor. Yeah.
So the guy that went and got the top shelf stuff went to the top shelf and got the stuff. It was wild turkey full of dust and everything else. It wasn't Crown. It wasn't Jack. It was the stuff on the top shelf. Anyhow, the evening proceeded and got a little nutty up in Jim's office, and somehow tie cutting got into.
It had to be a Southern Illinois farm thing. Cut your ties in half. Chop your beautiful tie in half.
Yeah, so my wife had quit working when our daughter was born, our second child, and we had one income. So I'm like, "You're not cutting my tie." So I grab my tie, and Doug comes over to try to cut me loose from my tie, and Tom Hance comes in with a knife and tries to cut my knife, misses, and grabs Doug's finger and cuts it all the way to the bone.
Did you still have the scar, Doug?
So anyway, we impeach, and we take him to the hospital.
Yeah,
they won't do
emergency
anything
clinic,
with it, right?
Yeah, they wouldn't finish it off.
And yeah, they wouldn't do anything with it. So we come back to the plant, and it's time. We need to head to the airport to get on our charter plane to head back, and it's pretty late by now probably. And so anyhow, Pete Bond's got this pickup truck. He's a farm boy. We get in the back of his pickup truck, and there's straw back there. It's about 30 degrees out, 25, 30. Yeah. It's cold. Big Ed, Doug's boss, who's my boss's boss, CEO of the G&T.
G&T, yeah.
And he leaps in the back of Pete's pickup truck with the straw. It's not clean straw.
And he rides to the airport happily.
He's suited up and he's drunk as hell. He doesn't care. And there's Doug. Which finger was it, Doug? That one. Not that one. That one. And there's Doug. So Doug, don't correct me either. Let me go. So anyhow, by the time we get back, they have to take me to Southern Illinois, come up to Springfield, over to Decatur, wherever at Decatur. And Doug drove over to Springfield with his finger wrapped up. And by the time he got home and explained to his wife that he had to go to the emergency room at probably 3 or 4 in the morning to bandage it up, it's just one of those evenings in the geothermal world that you just...
It's almost up there with you surfing on the hood of a car.
I forgot about that one. We weren't going to talk about that one.
A separate story.
But I will say this
Car
about
surfing.
Doug. We talk about blood and tears. We had that. And then this last year came the sweat. So Doug has truly bled for the industry.
So, Doug, thank you. It's been a great ride.
Who let the dogs out?
Go!
Who let the dogs out?
So who let the dogs out? I think that's what some of the folks in D.C. were saying every time we'd show up for a fly-in, at least for the last year. We actually had one very professional, very intellectual general counsel on tax for one of the senators that was very influential. After we met with him for the 4th time in 7 months, he smiled and said, "You guys just don't go away." And we said, "Yeah, no, we don't." He said, "I'm now suffering from renewable energy fatigue." And Doug's response to that was, "Good, we're making our message clear." I would just share one quick story, and then AV team, when I say hit it again, then I need you to hit the who let the dogs out. The one story I'll share, for those of you that don't know me, feel privileged at this point. I'm a little bit of a factual data kind of guy. That's the way I like to run our business. And the water furnace team has been gracious so far trying to adapt to that. Doug, at times when you're in a political process, trying to manage legislative process, it's a little murky. So one morning in July, Steve and I and Doug are driving to the Capitol to start a 12-day meeting in about 8.5 hours. And the first question was standard. "Doug, what do you think our chances are?" Doug went through a very succinct, this was fly-in number 3, I think, at this point. He went through a very succinct, factual update, and then proceeded to say, "We think we're at like 70 to 75%. So Steve and I are fired up. This was the most optimistic mode we'd been in the prior 3 fly-ins that we'd had. We get out of the car. We're met by the curb from one of our lobbyists at Invariant, Steve Bailey, who is an expert in tax counsel and tax legislation, and he updates us on the latest information that he got at 6:45 that morning that said only the commercial portion of the tax credit might survive and the residential portion won't survive. So we went from like 75% to Steve and I getting out of the cab going, "Okay, let's get back at it." It was like 75% to 10%. This is the kind of dynamic that you deal with on a regular basis. It's not as much fun as business, I will tell you that. So with that, there's a certain kind of dog that's described as being loyal, resilient, steadfast, and sometimes rightfully stubborn. And that's the bulldog. So at this moment, I would like to provide an Industry Appreciation Award to Doug Dougherty for his steadfast leadership in getting the tax credits reinstated with the only, that I'm aware of, and the first ever Geothermal Industry Bulldog Award.
Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out?
Well, the party was nice, the party was pumping. And everybody having a fun.
Actually, the term was used by my congressman who called me a bulldog because I wouldn't give up. And if I didn't have these gentlemen behind me, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Lots of people to thank. You who called your congressmen, your senators. It's a casebook example of grassroots lobbying. And the one takeaway I have, well, 2 takeaways I have, having been to Congress, I can't remember how many times, is we went from an unknown industry to a credible, viable industry in the eyes of Congress. And the way that we made that happen was because of all of the grassroots level. Congressmen and senators heard from the people in the geothermal heat pump industry. I'm a business owner. I'm a family man. I employ my son. I employ my nephew. You're killing us. You need to help us. Don't pick winners and losers. We need to level the playing field and give the same tax credit to geothermal heat pumps that we give to solar. And it resonated. So one of the things that we were able to accomplish is we are now a credible, viable economic development engine for the United States of America. All of our jobs are domestic. We're a domestic industry. We flippantly say you can't import a borehole, and that resonated with members of Congress. The other thing we were able to accomplish over the last 2 years is we now have champions of our industry. There were a lot of people who went to bat for us. There were a lot of Republicans who said, we're going to buck a lot of people by saying we support geothermal heat pumps as a viable, renewable technology that's environmentally friendly. And that was a real turning point for us. And so what we've done is we've become a recognizable industry, and we have now champions and supporters of our industry. And we will continue our effort to cultivate that, because Lord knows the federal government has influence over lots of things, including renewable energy and our industry. And if we don't maintain our contacts and our effort in Washington, down the road we're going to lose again. So we've got the wave that we needed, we've got the positive influence that we have, and we need to continue to cultivate that. And I want to thank my board, all of the manufacturers that supported me, and you out there who made the emails and the letters and the calls to the congressional office. We wouldn't have been able to do this without you, and I thank you very much.
Yeah. So the last point I want to make is we had bipartisan support, and the arguments were fundamental. We need parity. It's about jobs, and it's about sustaining resources for future generations. And that was the story we used in Washington. That was before we met Steve Nygren and a few other presenters here at this conference. There's a bigger story for GEO. Use the tax credit in the short term to invest in how we develop the market. Don't lead with it, close with it. We have plenty of other fundamental benefits to sell this solution to drive a society movement to manage thermal energy better than any other country and any other society in the history of mankind. Use this time to prepare for what we can't predict 4 years from now. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, GeoExchange team. Thank you. Yeah.